Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes, and welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. Today, I'm going to be talking about a collection of short stories. This collection includes several stories that are the original forms or parts of or about things in this collection of book covers I'm showing you now. That is Lady in the Tower, which is sort of the centerpiece of the Rowan, A Meeting of Minds, which is the centerpiece of Damia, uh, Apple, which is the centerpiece of, not the centerpiece, Wings of Pegasus is actually the cover of my personal copy of two books, the first two books in the Pegasus series, that is To Ride Pegasus and Pegasus in Flight. And Apple is one of the stories in To Ride Pegasus, which really is a bunch of linked together short stories. The Thorns of Barevi, which is the story that was originally the first couple chapters of Freedom's Landing. It started out its life as an attempt at short softcore pornography and was eventually turned into Freedom's Landing. And two short stories that are sort of outtakes, I suppose you could call it. There's a plot hole that people apparently used to complain about in The Ship Who Sang. And Honeymoon is Anne McCaffrey's attempt to fill those in. And The Littlest Dragonboy is the story of the origins of Cavan and his dragon Heth, who are characters that, if I recall correctly, we first see in The Renegades of Pern, which is why I have that particular Pern series book cover there. I will be talking more about the other short stories in this book because the other short stories are not actually part of these universes and are not part of these particular stories. So the book is Get Off the Unicorn, and such an interesting cover, isn't it? Very reflective of the 70s. The thing is that Get Off the Unicorn was apparently that was apparently the working title for a book. I would guess Pegasus in Flight. To Ride Pegasus, actually, would be my guess. But anyways, people had apparently been asking her for Get Off the Unicorn, and so finally her agent or publisher or what have you said, you know what, you should just write that. So she put together a collection of her short stories, which she says she never really feels comfortable in the short story format, but she put together a collection and published it under that title, and this is it. The picture on the cover is fairly clearly Cavan staggering onto the hatching grounds with Heth hatching, but that's neither here nor there. So my favorite two short stories in this series are Daughter and Doldrums, which they very much reflect the time that they were written in, the late 60s, the early 70s. They very much reflect a lot of the struggles women were having for equality at that time, the dealing with parents who would say, my daughter is going to university and my son is only going to college. The reflection that girls weren't worth as much as boys, that whole overweening standpoint, and it reflects that by being a story set in a distant future where that particular sexism still remained. That particular sexism was still at issue. And I think sometimes it's important to look back on these sorts of things, books that were written in an earlier time, not just because they're a good read, but because it allows you to place yourself into that period, to understand how people were thinking, to understand historical motivations of people to act on things because people were thinking so differently. In any event, I very much enjoy these two short stories, which are about the same character and her dealing with the sense of inadequacy her father has left her, with her attempts to make her father happy, and with the eventual realization that she shouldn't be going on the path that her father wants her to go on just because he wants her to go on it. That what she should be doing is going on her own path, and if it happens to go inside with her father's, great, but that she needs to pick her own way in life. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy the arguing that she has. I enjoy the way she perceives the world, which is so odd at times and seems to be a combination of reflective of the imaginary time that Anne McCaffrey has her living in and the way people would have been thinking in the 1970s. So, Daughter and Doldrums, both very entertaining. Changeling, I'm not going to talk about because it's weird. I think it's an interesting attempt on Anne McCaffrey's part to discuss the issue of gay men and their difficulties, the LGBT community generally, and their difficulties with adopting children into same-sex couples. But I'm not going to really discuss it because it's weird. I recommend it for its weirdness, for its off-puttingness, but it's a very, very strange story. Okay, Weather on Welladay is pretty much just a kind of an action-packed, semi-mystery to solve thing. There's radioactive alien whales, and people are killing them, and they have to figure out how to stop it. That's all it really is. Um, it's a fun yarn, but I wouldn't say that it's anything. I wouldn't say that it's worth writing home about. Horse from a Different Sea is one of Anne McCaffrey's weirder offerings, but it's very entertaining when you have the story of a doctor who discovers that he's dealing with men who are pregnant with alien children. That these young women at a bunch of bordellos and what call girls across the continental United States, perhaps even across the world, had been impregnating young men and then immolating themselves a few weeks later. Um, this story involves the doctor saying, "I'm just keeping my notes, and when this call comes out, we'll see what happens." It's an interesting little sideways approach to the concept of alien life, um, and it manages to be both fun and disturbing and horrifying with the immolation, and ends with this perplexed shrug that I think sums up the whole story very, very beautifully. It runs you through a gamut of emotions, that one. Finders Keepers and the Great Canine Chorus are both, I think, sort of incidentally set in the talent universe. Finders Keepers, you have a young boy who, in order to avoid exploitation, when he takes a shot to the head, pretends that he's lost all of his clairvoyant abilities. And the Great Canine Chorus is about child exploitation, But this is about a girl who is severely physically disabled but is telepathic, and a man's attempts to help her that fail because she's a telepath and he can't tell people, well, I know that there's a child in trouble in here because she contacted me telepathically. He has nothing he can bring to child services to say, we need to get her out. And there's nothing he can do to help her because she refuses his help, and he can't get an order from a judge or any sort of official sanction to do things for her because all he can do is tell people, well, she's telepathic. And it follows the arc of the gradual breakdown of her character, of the way she's used, of how she changes, and it ends in tragedy, and it ends with the double tragedy of him basically choosing to walk away. That he'll see his dog acting the same way his dog did before they found her, and he'll just pull his dog along because he can't face this again. He can't face these children that he can't help. He can't help them, he can't make them better, he can't get them out, he can't tell anybody because what's he going to say? Well, I found out that there was a telepath in the city. There's nothing he can do to help these kids, and so he turns his back on them and he walks away because it's just too awful. And it's sort of the double tragedy that this little girl becomes something so awful, that she dies in such an awful way, and that he's decided that because he can't do anything, he's just not going to try. He's just going to walk away from it. And it has the feeling of common sense, the feeling of if you can't do anything, you might as well just walk away from it because there's nothing you can do. And it covers such an interesting double-sided tragedy there of both ends of it, that I really, really like the way it handles that. And the last story in the book that doesn't belong in the greater pantheon of Anne McCaffrey novels is A Proper Santa Claus. And that one's about a little boy who you can't really be sure whether his art and what he feels about his art is imagination or whether he's genuinely got some sort of magic powers bringing things to life. It's hard to tell because he keeps on saying that, well, his pictures snuffed themselves on the walls, that they would run into a wall and dissolve. And so he tries to he likes making art, and he keeps on feeling like his parents don't understand it, and that his teacher doesn't understand it. And so the book follows his various exploits with various kinds and types of art materials that he's gotten. And he tries to tell people about his art, and they're not listening, they're not looking at it right. But finally, he's given the suggestion on Christmas to make a Santa Claus, and the story ends with a teacher who, while trying to impart a good message, ruins everything. And it has that flavor of the way adults can ruin everything for kids just by saying the wrong thing because they don't see things the way children do. I think we all have some experience like that in our lives. Well, I hope we do, because I feel it should be a consistent thing to understand kids when we accidentally ruin things. And that's Get Off the Unicorn. Thank you all for coming, and hope to see you again.